to first start off by saying that we must remember that there were wonderful cities 50 years ago, like Amsterdam, Barcelona, etc., when the level of IT available today was zero. And they functioned very well 40 years ago. And there were large cities like Tokyo and Paris and London and Manhattan, which functioned very well without all this. So the issue is not just technology availability. The issue is your basic infrastructure and whether that's available. And coming from IIT Delhi, we are huge users of IT, and we are all in favor of having as much IT as possible. But our experience, at least as far as transport and cities are concerned, is that IT is an enabler. It's not an attractor. And so once people use certain things, they can use them more comfortably because of IT. And you can have more efficiencies. But it's not something which makes us on its own work well. And that's something which is very clear. Secondly, IT increases energy use as of today. It doesn't decrease energy use. The more communication you have, the more internet you have, more people travel. They don't travel less, because then all kinds of delivery services increase. People are in touch, much more in touch with each other. Then they want to meet each other and so on. So there's no evidence up to now that IT either reduces physical needs like paper use. As a matter of fact, paper use has increased dramatically since the advent of computers. And there's evidence up to now that it does not reduce travel. As a matter of fact, in many situations, it increases travel. So our very serious problem we are facing today, if the International Committee is correct on climate change, and these are the carbon dioxide production by different countries. And if you see over here, on the right-hand side is India, which has a very low carbon dioxide production per capita, but we are riding on the back of very poor people. If we didn't have 90% poor people, we wouldn't have this low carbon dioxide use. As a matter of fact, I've done the calculation for how much carbon dioxide Indians produce, and it turns out that most of the people sitting in this room produce about the same amount of carbon dioxide as Europeans, much less than Americans, but about the same as Europeans. And it's the poor who produce very little. Our projections are that by, say, 2050, we should have carbon dioxide production around 5 tons per capita, which means that, like we are asking the Americans and the Europeans to reduce their energy consumption and carbon dioxide production, everyone sitting in this room will have to reduce their consumption. Because if we want the country to improve, then the poor people who are here at a very, very small energy consumption level, their energy consumption has to increase. Therefore, everyone in this room, as you can see, everyone in this room is around here, and we'll have to come down. So therefore, in the next 30, we cannot hide. We are very comfortably hiding behind our energy use because we have so many poor people. We take averages. And I think we have to understand that everyone sitting in this room, like Europeans, in the next 30 years will have to reduce their energy consumption. And you can only reduce energy consumption if your infrastructure dead costs are low. And therefore, when we talk about transportation, that means the infrastructure has to be less. So anything which is built underground, overground, elevated, number of stories, that is huge energy consumption system. And so we'll have to come down to the surface if we have to reduce energy consumption. And as I'll go along, that, for example, there is no city in Europe which has built any elevated structure in the last 30 years. Because elevated structures, whether they are highways or other transportation modes, destroy the city. The experience is wherever you have an elevated structure, within 20, 30 years, those corridors have warehouses, shops, or businesses, and people in the middle class, upper middle class, move out of areas and corridors where you have elevated structures, unless you are like Tokyo, where you have no place to go, or Hong Kong. But everywhere else, people are not allowing any elevated structure to be made in the vicinity of their home in the world. So we are about 50 years behind in our thinking, and we are destroying our cities. My suspicion is that Delhi will be destroyed within 30 years because of all the elevated structures on the main arteries where decent people live. And they'll become slums. And unless we do something about it. So poor of India will have to increase their energy consumption. We'll have to reduce our energy consumption. And then how do you say what is a good city? I think you have to ask only 2 or 3 questions. A good city is one where my daughter or my grandmother can cross the road at any time of the day or night without any help. If the answer is no, then your city is useless. I don't care what you put in it. The road has to be safe for my daughter, who's 7 years old, and for my grandmother, who's 75 years old. And they should be able to go anywhere they want without the help of their parents or other people. If you cannot do that, then you cannot have a good city. There's a disjuncture in how we behave. All of us go abroad, and except the very rich, we don't have a personal car when we go abroad. Then we are forced to use public transport, and then we say, I use public transport when I'm in London. That's because you don't have a car. And then we look at London as pedestrians. But when we come back to Delhi or Mumbai or Kolkata or Bangalore, then we're not willing to go 2 steps without our car. Then we look at the city through the windows of our car. And that's how we are destroying our cities, by looking through the windows of our car. And then we demand things which actually are counterproductive by looking through the windshield of our car. All my daily needs should be available within walking distance. And for about 95% of our population, our cities, it's true today that most of the citizens of the city have everything available within walking distance, except the rich, who live in gated communities. And that style is not feasible 50 years from today. I should be able to, whether a country is democratic or not, you can judge from the road. If everyone using the road has an equal opportunity to use the road, then it's a democratic country. By that criterion, Delhi, like Cairo, and you see what happened in Cairo, is a very, very undemocratic society. Because on the road, only rich people have a right to use that road and no one else. And this shows how undemocratic we are, and we really don't care. We just don't care, from the chief minister downwards. Coming here, I see that all the T-junctions have been converted where the vehicles go through on the left-hand side without waiting for the traffic light, which means the pedestrians can never cross the road. All junctions have free left turns. That means pedestrians can never cross the road. No civilized city allows free left turns. Everyone has to stop at the red light so that pedestrians have a pedestrian phase. And I'll go through this very quickly. What this shows basically is that your lowest CO2 production is a bus. And this comes from London, where the average bus occupancy is 10 in London. Average bus occupancy in Delhi is 40. So you can imagine that last graph, blue bar, will become 1/4. That means the most efficient service as far as transport is concerned is, of course, walking and cycling. But if you want to use motorized transport, then the most efficient in terms of energy consumption and CO2 production is a bus on the surface. There is nothing else as of today which is better. This is, I've calculated for Delhi, not using the infrastructure. Sorry, this is for UK, which shows that CO2 production is the least for the bus, and the metro is only good if it is at peak capacity. At present, Delhi Metro is running at 20% capacity. And therefore, the Delhi Metro is quite inefficient as far as energy consumption and CO2 production at the powerhouse is concerned. In India, electric traction is very inefficient because of the quality of our coal and the transmission losses. So if you calculate CO2 produced per passenger in any electrical system at the power station, you'll find that the carbon dioxide production is very high, and also fly ash, which is destroying the area around all our power stations. This is that if you are going 3 kilometers, then the metro is the slowest way to go. It's about the same as walking. If you go 6 kilometers, then the metro, a dedicated bus lane, and the bicycle take the same time door to door. So up to 6 kilometers, public transport will always be slower, unless you have congestion. In this, the car and the motorcycle are going at 20 kilometers an hour. You can see that the car remains the best way to go, door to door, except for 3 kilometers. So if you want public transport to be faster, then congestion is a solution. And we know that in Europe, people do not shift to public transport unless the average, if they own a car, unless the average speed of the car is less than 15 kilometers an hour. And that's what it is. The average speed of cars in London, Tokyo, Manhattan, Paris, etc., is all under 15 kilometers an hour during rush hour. So unless you have congestion, that's condition number one. For private transport and no congestion for public transport, you cannot have people using public transport by choice. Second condition is you should have no parking where you're going. We find in Europe that people are willing to spend 20 minutes more per trip in their own car compared to public transport if they are parking where they're going. So if you talk to your friends, Indians who work in the World Bank in Washington, those who get a free parking space in the World Bank all drive. They don't use public transport. It's only those officers who don't get a free parking spot in the World Bank use public transport. So parking has to be removed from workplaces if you want people to use public transport. Do not provide parking. And if you provide parking, you're destroying the possibility of public transport use, especially in very unequal societies where we do this. Public transport will not get used in India. Everyone is lying that they will use public transport by choice. There's no evidence from anywhere in the world that except enthusiasts and young people use public transport by choice. Therefore, we should not remove congestion. What we should do is design our roads so that cars move at 15 kilometers per hour on an average, including traffic lights. But it should be predictable. That I should know that it takes me 25 minutes to go 10 kilometers, and it should take 25 minutes every day. Then people don't mind it. What happens in the way our roads are designed, and they're designed horribly. The reason we have congestion is not because we don't have enough road space. Delhi has more road space than London, and 1/6 the number of cars per capita. And we have more traffic jams in Delhi than London. It's amazing. More road space, 1/6 the number of cars, but it doesn't work. That's because of two reasons. Number one, the roads are designed horribly. And number two, there's no enforcement. So what you see here is that if you have congestion, it's only then that car becomes slower at 12 kilometers or more. And the evidence from the Delhi metro is that the average trip length is more than 12 kilometers. So people only use underground and overground systems when your trip lengths are long, more than 12 kilometers. And that's a wrong way to plan a future city. You don't want people to go long distances. So once you make fast, what we have found is that wherever there's fast transport available, rich people move out of the city, live in bigger houses, use a huge amount of energy going in public transport in long distances, and then they have big houses and they consume even more energy. So what happens is, and they keep 3 cars in the big house then. So by providing fast public transport, you double energy use, which is opposite of what people thought. Now, this is what has happened in Delhi. The DPR of the Delhi Metro said that in 2005, when 60 kilometers are completed, 29 lakh people will ride it per day. The actual ridership was 6 lakhs in 2005.